As technology continues to play an integral role in education, it's only natural that experts are beginning to wonder if we've reached a saturation point. So, for our next session, does the EdTech industry have an oversaturation problem? I would like to call on stage Hannah Samira, Director and Co-founder of Media Alliance Gaming Studio, Stephanie Joyce, founder of Pulse DNA, and Jeff Hoffman, President and CEO of Cyber Intelligent Partners. Give it up for our next panelists, everyone.
Test.
Okay,
Test.
cool. Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. It's been a great Education 2.0 conference so far. Had a chance to read my esteemed panelists' bios, and I feel like we have some commonalities in our background, our deep passion for education. So I figured we'd treat this more as a fireside chat, give us all equal chances to kind of weigh in on the potential oversaturation in EdTech, but I think we talked a little bit before the conference and we found out it's more about connectivity in the EdTech space and creating equitable pathways for K-12 and higher ed in the EdTech space. So without further ado, I figured we'd start with intros to kick things off. And Jeff, let's start with you.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you, everybody, for taking the time to be here at the conference. Education 2.0 Leadership, thank you for putting this together. It's great to be here in this very hot 100-plus degree weather in Las Vegas. Anyway, so my name is Jeff Hoffman. I am the president and CEO of a company called Cyber Intelligent Partners. We primarily focus on consulting and advising for cyber services, whether that's critical infrastructure like utility companies, energy, governments, could be U.S. governments, military. But we're also taking a very close look in encouraging more emphasis and investment in education, especially K through 12 public education. And if you look at some of the trends, especially with a government organization like Department of Homeland Security, they actually just published a report that highlighted K through 12 training for cybersecurity in education should be a #1 priority. And we can talk later about some of the other initiatives that are underway, some legislation that will actually produce funding for technology improvement programs and training. And that's my main takeaway. Investors are getting tired. Investors love the adventure, and I know they like a little bit of risk. And I think they're looking for something a little new, more new than what we've seen in the past. And COVID, post-COVID conditions and environment, I think create that opportunity. And thank you, Stephanie. Thank you.
Jeff, I know you have a unique take on how educators could be, more involved in the EdTech space. You have a unique spin on that, so we'll touch on that in a little bit. Hannah, do you mind going with a little bit of your introduction and what you're doing in the EdTech space?
Yeah, so my name is Hannah Samira. I'm the co-founder and director of Media Alliance Gaming Studios. My company simulates we came up with a method of learning called SES, a Strategic Edutainment Simulation. And we basically try to gamify the learning process and make it engaging and more fun. We do that particularly for schools, but also creating training materials for government institutions and companies. And that's my passion, is to tap into things that drive us as humans, human core drives, and put that into the learning process and make it fun for students so that they want to be at school, so that they want to delve into the material.
Edutainment is such a buzzword in the EdTech space because I think every parent here knows or heard of parents' kids playing in Roblox, buying your kids Robux, and they tend to spend more time in Roblox than they do on their homework. So it's a very exciting time to have conversations around EdTech and know the future implications of getting into EdTech and how it works in the gaming space. So I'm so glad that you're here.
Yeah, I'll actually jump in too, because it's really important from where I come from to basically distinguish between games that are used to teach and games that are designed specifically to tap into the human core drives and educate. Because you could use Monopoly to teach, but Monopoly wasn't necessarily designed to be used in a classroom to tap into the human core drives and gamify the learning process.
Really good point. And just to round things out, I'm Stephanie Joyce. I am the founder of Pulse DNA. DNA stands for Decentralized News Arena. There is a fifth man of the apocalypse that rolled into town, along with pestilence, famine, and war. We have misinformation. And that was born out of the era when I was a journalism student, and I also was in the Air Force Reserve Officer Training Program. I wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to serve my country in all the ways. And then 9/11 happened. And I was like, what's happening? And if you remember something very interesting of the era, this was before the smartphone, if you could remember that, before TikTok, all of that, there was a lot of tail spinning that started to happen in news. And I didn't like it. I didn't like the idea of fighting a war I didn't have all the information on. Fast forward 20 years later, and nothing's really changed. We are living in an era of cancel culture, misinformation, confirmation bias, and we're divided more than ever, even at the dinner table. So the inception of Pulse DNA really started as my story as a journalism student, and not going into the military, and wanting to create unique third-party perspectives that go deeper than the headlines. So what do I mean by that? I was a writer-producer for PBS, working on a border war debate when I was going to University of Arizona in Tucson, and it was just so polarizing, the Dr. Fuming borders, extreme left, kind of tugging and doing kind of emotional blows. It's interesting to see priests trying to do emotional blows with the Minutemen that are kind of extreme right. And we couldn't really bridge the divide until we had commenters calling in and giving unique third-party perspectives and stopping these people debating in their tracks and thinking, oh yeah, okay, what is happening on Mexico's border? How are they treating people? And I was like, this is great conversation. Can we capture this data? So that is the genesis of where Pulse DNA comes from, is that we need to dissect the news, go deeper than the headlines, and make it news for the people, by the people. And there's a big helping of EdTech in all of that, and gamification too, because we need to bring in kids and people age 40 to 94 in the conversation if we're going to turn the ship around and start creating headlines that we can believe in, or at least, bridge the divide on what we're thinking around the headlines. So that's a little bit about me, but delving a little bit further, specifically on what your take is on the saturation problem, Jeff, and what is your unique solve, and what do you think would help you get activated in your unique solve in the EdTech space?
Well, thank you. And actually, specifically for this conference, as we start looking to the future, and I emphasize in a post-COVID pandemic, there's been over $120 billion in investments since 2022 in education technology, EdTech, and that's across software, hardware, and content. And a lot of that has been focused on virtual learning. I'm going to have a bit of a different take it or leave it. Virtual learning, I was just watching the local Las Vegas news this morning, and they were talking about a city, Atlanta, Georgia, where their performance still was not at the levels that it was pre-COVID. And they actually are saying a part of that factor is virtual learning platforms. We need to get our kids back in school physically. We need to have them attending school and being more frequent in their participation. But I brought a quote, so if you allow me, it's a little bit of a longer quote, but I think it's very telling and could set the stage as we look, say, to 2024, Education 3.0. But it was a essay that was put together actually in 1869 by a past president of Harvard. He was a president for 40 years, Charles Eliot. And his essay was called The New Education. And it quoted, "What can I do with my boy or girl? I can afford and I'm glad to give her the best training to be had. I should be proud to have him turn out a preacher or a learned woman, but I don't think they have the making of that in them. I want to give him a practical education, one that'll prepare him or her better than I was prepared to follow my business or any active calling. The classical schools and the colleges do not offer what I want. Where can I put my children? I have 3 boys, 12, 9, and 5. Alternative choices are limited and expensive. And I will say that virtual learning platforms do offer a valuable alternative. But here is the real need and a very serious problem. And this difficulty presses more heavily upon the thoughtful American than in Europe. American schools, especially public schools, number one, is there oversaturation? Yes, there is an oversaturation of investment in virtual learning platforms. However, there's also biased, and you touched on this a bit. We need to get the politics out of the classrooms. We need to get something like an education union should not influence an investor, and we need to get back to fair competition in bringing capitalism back into our education environment and in our future for our kids.
Absolutely. And Hannah, did you want to weigh in on that and say, share a few words on your unique take on EdTech and what are you doing to enhance it and make it socially equitable for everybody?
Yeah, so I come from the other side, so I'll kind of play the devil's advocate here. I believe that right now there's not an oversaturation and there's not too much EdTech, but there hasn't been enough quality tools that have been created to make virtual learning equitable, like you say, accessible, and really worthwhile. And I'll give an example of our first simulator that my company developed. It's called Sagar, and it basically simulates, it puts the student in the place of the Supreme Commander of Israel during the Yom Kippur War. Very complex. The student or user is managing the war on air, land, and sea, as well as the diplomatic events. And I believe that just from a learning standpoint, I'm able to pass on through the simulator a lot more information, say in an hour, than the student could get by watching a video, watching a documentary, reading a book, or listening to a discussion.
Like the full kinesthetic learning experience.
Yeah, right. Like they say, in psychology or in marketing, that you need to be touched 7 times or hear something 7 times to remember. And in the simulator, you're touched 7 times in different ways. For example, you maybe get a radio report, you hear that. You dialogue with a world leader. You interrogate a spy. You do all kinds of things, which again is tapping into the human core drive, so you're interested in doing that. You want to do that. And you're also hearing that information is getting passed to you in different ways.
That is so fascinating, because I think inherently where we're going with EdTech is this VR kind of simulations and getting kids involved that goes beyond what I was speaking to earlier, the roadblocks. So making it educational, accessible, and hopefully it's not just, the better funded schools that get access to that. And that's maybe something maybe we could delve into and maybe figure out some solves here, because we have the brains here to do it. How can we get it accessible to kids in every school? Because I don't think the problem is a saturation in EdTech. I mean, we have Khan Academy, we have Udemy. I'm a lifelong learner. I think everyone here in this room is. We love these pathways of learning, but, it's our kids that are going to carry the torch, and take us, hopefully, what I feel is out of the era of information or misinformation and get us into a better day of information. But it means we have to have a lot of hard conversations along the way. And simulations is a really hot topic, I think, in education space. And can we get full equal access to it is an interesting question, I think. Where I think the solve is in making more truthful news and what I call the IOI, or Internet of Ideas, because we live in the IoT, it's the Internet of Things, but I like to call it the IOJ, the Internet of Junk. How do we get out of the Internet of Junk? Well, we have to be able to create this kind of ranking scoring system to make things feel credible again. So the idea behind Pulse DNA was, let's create credibility scores. And so what does that look like? Anyone here has seen or used Rotten Tomatoes that scores movies? You have the audience score, and then you have the critic score. And in the era of AI, we'll talk a little bit more about that. I want to get both of your takes on AI and EdTech, because that's going to be interesting. But we have chat-generated or chatbot-generated news, and then we actually rank it and compare it to scholarly websites and give it a score. So just like you grade a paper, 60% credibility on that news, probably not that credible. Probably wasn't cited. The journalist was under hard deadlines. they didn't do the research, or it just wasn't credible, you know, and that's fine. The audience score is at the end of our at the bottom of our AI-generated news. You can take a 10-second survey, and you can see what your constituents in your communities through heat maps, regionally and globally, what you're thinking in the community, so you know what the water cooler conversation is, and even though it's not preferentially stacked based on credibility score, it's good to know what the audience is thinking too. Because I don't always ever agree with the critic's choice downing a movie when you see the audience score so high, because it might be, you know, something of note or merit that encapsulates the zeitgeist of that era, right? So that's a little bit more about how I feel my technology and platform is disrupting the EdTech space, or adding to it, or making its mark. But maybe we could just now that's a good segment or leeway to AI and EdTech. Any predictors or indicators you think how AI will have a play in EdTech? Jeff?
Yeah, thank you again. Hannah, I really liked your comment where you say that we need new tools, and of course this is about investment. So we do need the balance of investment, especially in these new tools that aren't necessarily being invested in. So beyond AI, and as you know, that's a big area for me, is cyber education or cyber training for educators. And that includes threats that virtual platforms or new tools could exist in a classroom. And you're starting to see trends in a cybersecurity environment against the education sector. Microsoft just put out a report. They said in the last 30 days, education has been the highest sector impacted by compromises from adversaries, hacktivists, cyber criminals. And in Connecticut, there was actually a school that was shut down for at least 1 to 2 days because of a ransomware attack against that school. So AI, and I'll do a little marketing pitch for Forbes, but they put together a great article where they talked about 5 trends to look at in 2022, which they still apply in 23 and 24 and beyond. And one of those was artificial intelligence. With AI, I think there's the caveat to that. Prior to coming back to the U.S., I was living in England, and I did some research on artificial intelligence at King's College. And a part of that research really focused on the ethics of AI and safety. So as we have this positive contribution to education and the use of AI, we also have to be careful with the development. But I also want to highlight beyond AI, another trend that the Forbes editorial had highlighted is social learning. Highly agree, that we need to have this balanced approach. I'm very headstrong in getting kids back in school and more frequently, but tutoring. I think virtual learning platforms are perfect for that type of environment. The parents need it. So it's not only the companies like us that need the investment for our product ideas. Parents need help in getting our kids back on performance track where they were pre-COVID. But I'm sure you have kids in the audience. You've probably seen your kids play Fortnite, and that's an idea. My kids play Fortnite with their friends in other states, other countries. And, to have that kind of platform and empower the students, our kids, at a younger age to learn from each other, I think that's another area for innovation and investment.
Hannah, your take on Gen AI and how it's influencing, affecting EdTech?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I have some other things to say about that too. But my main concern with AI is student laziness. That it's just too easy to go and just ask your computer what to do. But I think that makes gamification of the learning process even more important, because we have to make students want to learn. We have to make students not just want to learn, but be excited about it, be engaged, and tap into those core drives that make them want to be there. So to me, I see EdTech as kind of a solution, in a way, to some of the problems that AI presents. And it's, let's say it's a war against student laziness.
It's like a bridge to creating sustainable use of AI without the bots running amok, or the humans kind of getting 100% evolved and left to their own devices. It's like it could be a beautiful harmony, I almost think, with generative AI, because I think about how quickly kids can learn by asking ChatGPT, how do I do this? But I don't know if anyone here in the audience has heard of hallucinations and how that's a problem in ChatGPT. Has anyone have heard of it? Okay, so hallucinations is this weird, and I work for a data analytics firm. I'm a global business director 3 times for startups and different series of funding. And the hallucination thing is real because it makes ChatGPT only 60% of the time truthful. And remember how I was talking earlier about credibility and how that's important in the news? Well, what it means that this ghost in the machine is hallucinating, you ask it a simple question, it can write you code. So we're at a dawn of a new era, a new epoch, if you will, where 100 years ago, education wasn't equally accessible to everybody, maybe a little bit longer than 100 years ago. And then education was, becoming more of a centralized thing and equally accessible to any kid. We're at a new epoch where 100 years, fast forward 100 years to today, anyone could be a coder, and it's a different language. So 20% of our population knows how to code today, but every one of you in this audience and here up on the stage, we're coders now. If you just know how to ask the questions and go 10, 15, 20 layers deep and keep asking the questions until you feel like you got the answers. What hallucinations are doing is that you ask it a question as simple as, hey, who are the founders or the current, CEO of Microsoft, or maybe some lesser known company, and if it doesn't have the answer, it rather hallucinate and tell you an answer and say, like, Sofia Vergara is the CEO of Microsoft, rather than say, I don't know, Stephanie. Like, maybe you tell me or teach me something. So there has to be equal parts checks and balances of a human component training the training model, and that's all machine learning AI is, to where it actually allows for the user or learner or participant to make it smarter and better, and the bot needs to be honest, So I think you're right, Hannah. Like, EdTech is the bridge for making smarter AI, because students are curious by nature. They like to break things, but they like to move fast and they like to play. I think that is an incredible place to start, to make sure that we can believe in this new era where AI is teaching us, but teach us truthfully. I think that's the short of it.
Let me just add one quick point. I'm a adjunct with the state of New York, and I never would have imagined putting in my syllabus, please do not use ChatGPT to write your research paper.
It has like the gray background if
Exactly.
you do it, and it's like, oh, plagiarism.
And so now, exactly, beyond plagiarism, now you got to look to see, is this really content and research and sourcing all
it's
the
like
different
bot or
academic.
not, like hot or not, bot or not. How do we discern? Do you have an answer to that, being in cybersecurity and in the tech?
Well, I guess maybe you could say we'll convert. We'll say use ChatGPT. We'll call it a bot research project, right? No, I'm just kidding.
But then again, back to Hannah's point, having EdTech as that bridge to make sure the generative AI, the intelligent agents is another word for generative AI, is being honest, is allowing that space for equal human intervention and bot creation, right? I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to say on that.
Yeah, and I would just say to take away the incentive to use the chat when you shouldn't be, make students and it doesn't have to be students even, companies that are training their employees, make them want to learn what they should be learning or do what they should be doing, writing their paper, through gamification, rather than having them want, so they don't even want to go to AI. They want to do it themselves, and we have to reinforce the critical thinking.
And let's not forget the basics, the classics of education, math, reading, and science, right? We still want kids to open a book and read it. So again, this is I think this is where I offer a little bit of alternative approach, right? To keep a balance. between some of our common sense classroom practices, but also starting to blend that with some of these future technologies, which I think are just outstanding. There's a lot of great innovators and talent. But again, we can't lose sight. Because if you look at the statistics, you look at the performance from a U.S. Perspective, we're behind, and we're way behind other countries. So we need to climb back up, and we need to get past this COVID pandemic era and move forward into, like I said, Education 3.0. I like that for 2024.
Love it. We have 15 minutes left, but I want to make sure we have ample time for Q&A because I think this is a hot topic. But what do you think, Jeff, is the future for EdTech? Any predictions on where you think it could go, or maybe not so benevolently will go? And what is the next step in the road for what you're doing in your space and with your company? So it's a twofer question.
Yeah. EdTech definitely is an area that requires investment. Let's call it smart investment, fair, competitive investment. Like I said, you remove the politics, I think you're going to be amazed on where we can go in the future. I don't have to tell you, I think everybody here knows it, that we are very divided right now. And if we're divided, how can we fix this country?
The answer is education.
That's where it starts. It starts in K through 12, right? So if you got a corporate index score, or like I said, an education union platform that's influencing what our K through 12, what our future generation is to become, you're losing half the country. You're losing half the ideas and the innovation and the investment that you could have. Cancel culture needs to be done. Let's just move on. And so we can all decide that, right, in future elections. But, well, you're fair to do that, right? And that's why we have conversation, right?
I think it's not so much whether you agree with cancel culture or not. It's reintroducing the art of elevated discussion. And let's seek to understand rather than divide. And I think that's the biggest message I'm getting in this conference. There was ladies speaking in a beautiful and lively conference earlier today about physical learning. I love that conference because one teacher was talking about teaching fractions while cooking. And I was like, man, I would have actually maybe aced math class rather than get scared in a corner and have test anxiety because it wasn't kinesthetic or as mnemonic for me or fun. And frankly, I was a child. I'm kind of an adult child too. But I had a wild imagination, and I just hated how finite math was. But make it involved in something that's new and you love to do, and it's exciting, and because you're almost adulting as a kid learning how to cook, and it's like something you didn't have access to, and it's new and it's invigorating. I think that's what we need to reintroduce as adults too, right? We all need to go out there, be a part of our world, be integrated with our world, do an activity that, enlivens us, and have a discussion, not only from what we're observing, but things that we think are kind of fishy and we don't quite really like either. And if we disagree, that's okay. But we need to be in the pursuit of knowledge and constantly seeking to educate ourselves about it, I think is the short of it, from my viewpoint. Hannah, did you want to weigh in on that? And where's the future of EdTech going, your predictions, and where your company's going with all this?
Yeah, so I look at Generation Z. They don't know anything but screens. Like, they grew up with cell phones, iPads. So I think we can't be blind from the fact that EdTech is the future. And we have to blend the way we educate students and employees. We can't get away from screens. We can't fight screens. I think today, especially like our generation, there's kind of an effort to fight the screen. And I do agree that we have to have balance. And like you said, Jeff, we should bring students more into the classroom. I can say, from a developer standpoint, I don't like it when my employees don't come into the office. If it's too long of just work from home, I think that's a problem. So the same thing at schools. But We have to use harness the tools that the current generation of students is used to using. They're used to cell phones, they're used to iPads. So I really think that EdTech is the future, and that's what my company seeks to do.
That's amazing. I, at one point, was an advisor on a gamification platform leveraging Roblox, and their task was to create level 7 learners. I don't know if you heard about that in the education space, but you get to the point of fluency where even kids in grade school, they do a project like Meditate with Deepak Chopra, and they actually got a virtual yoga class spun up with Deepak Chopra. It was so cool. And you see these kids in front of the TV, not just playing Roblox, but they're doing yoga in real life while playing Roblox. And that's where the rubber hits the road, right? Like you're learning and playing. And why can't it be both? Why can't you play while you learn? And I think that's the space we need to explore more. So level 7 learners, you're actually allowing 7-year-olds to learn and teach back. Because you see it in the families, like 7-year-olds teaching the 5-year-old in the family in the home, and you reach the level of affluency where you're becoming the teacher, and seeing kids do this and feel empowered to do this, I think that's where all of this is going, because then you make them less susceptible to bias and influence in social pressures that mainstream news is impressing on us. I mean, who here watches mainstream news? Nobody? A little bit? Do you think it's biased or it's something you would like believe in, you know?
I watch two types of news. Mm-hmm. Usually I watch something on the right and on the left. So I
Smart.
watch MSNBC and I watch Fox News.
Yes.
And then you assume that both of them give you a biased and untruthful way of the world. But if you combine the message from the right and the left,
1,000%.
And add Sky News right in the middle, the British.
It's somewhere up there in the cloud.
but you can distill what really is the truth by looking for inconsistencies from one and the other, and looking at where they would possibly lie if they wanted to manipulate you in a certain way.
Well, it's so powerful what you're saying, because early users or people validating our idea at Pulse DNA were career journalists like Kitty Pilgrim, Frank Sesno, Aaron Brockovich has gotten wind of our idea, and they can't wait to debate the headlines beyond the headlines. My co-founder, Michael Wilson, he was on a CNN show or Fox News. I forgot which one. For me, it doesn't matter because we want to be centrist and let people debate. But it was called News Beyond the News. And the people, like you're saying, CNN and Fox, we're talking Kitty Program. She was a journalist 20, 30 years. And people like Kitty Program worked for both Fox and CNN. And it's like, I only get to tell part of the truth. So you know that this is true from career journalists working for these top, tier 1 media news outlets. They're saying this. We need to change that narrative around and create better pathways for people to disseminate and learn and share ideas.
Watch CNN for 5 minutes to figure out that they don't focus on giving you the news, but they're activists. They want to sell you a certain message.
Well, not only that, I saw a recent 60 Seconds episode where ex-Google executives and people working for Facebook, trying to create, diplomacy during the elections, even though we know Facebook kind of botched that and rigging elections and stuff. That's a whole other, we can talk about that offline. But the important thing there is that ex-executives of these social media conglomerates were saying, social media as it is, which is the #1 source of news, by the way, for millennial, the largest voting demographic, millennial and under, 90% of us get our news from social media. We know that's a problem because it's fear biased, and it's what ex-Google CEOs would say, or executives rather. Social media is here to serve as division entrepreneurs. So when they're saying that, and they worked for the top tier, search analysis, search platforms, and social media platforms, we know we need to come up with something different. And I think it's going to start in the EdTech space, right? So
Yeah. And getting back to your point, you look at some of those marketing pitches of the media venues, going back on our topic, is there oversaturation? Yes, there's an imbalance that leads to oversaturation in certain areas that should have actual more investment. In answering your second question, I have a company, and as we introduce these new tools and the whole digital ecosystem around education grows, so does the threat. And that's why I've got partners. We're ready to go to develop a product that provides cyber training for educators and bringing them up into new knowledge. So right now, if you look at curriculum, say, I don't know, cyber, I can't remember exactly what it is, but it offers curriculum for teachers to provide to the students. But there's no prerequisite for teachers to have any kind of cyber knowledge or background or skills. And so there's a gap there. And this goes to the investment. Investors are hungry. They want something new, right? And like I said before, they want that adventure. They want that little bit of risk. And if you're a seed or a startup like Cyber Intelligent Partners, we've got a solutions roadmap. We've got partners that are very credible. One of the partners was in the top 20 trading platform award winners last year. But I need LOIs, right? I've got a roadmap that has a very plausible return on investment, revenue plan. But I need letters of intent from clients who can do a prototype, and I need money. And so for the investors, I can tell you, we can talk after this. Right now, if we had 1.2 million, we could get this thing moving. But without the investor, we're always going to be at that stalemate.
And if I could just dovetail on that, we need benevolent investors, because when the collateral is education involving kids, it's not about, is this going to make money so much as, is this part of the world building that I actually want to be a part of again? It's kind of important, just a little bit.
1.2 million? No, just kidding.
Oh, you want to ask a question? We have, I think, just a couple more minutes, but Hannah, did you want to round this out and talk a little bit more about, your future opportunities and what you're doing with your business?
Yeah, I just have a point. This kind of goes into making it EdTech equitable too. I think there's a lot of opportunity for companies to use underprivileged schools to test a lot of their products. And actually, I was at the previous Education 2.0 conference in Dubai, and ran into a leader of a school in Africa, and they're currently helping me test. So I think I think that developers like myself and you, Jeff, can look for creative ways that can be mutually beneficial.
Thank you.
And then I think about EdTech helping the current Africa crisis. There's a need for fertilizer, but it goes beyond that. Several country leaders rushed to Russia and talked to Putin like, hey, we need fertilizer. Why is it a big deal? Because I had this conversation with my niece and friends. It's like, it's just poo, Stephanie. Why is it so hard for them to get? Well, when half of China's land, or half of Africa's land has been sold out to China because they're getting precious metals out of there, well, that takes a lot of the farmland away. There's certain nitrate, and I'm a master gardener, by the way, so I know a little bit about fertilizer. My lady. Master gardeners are going to help create sustainable food sources for the world, and if you're well fed, food is medicine. We know this. So the problem with fertilizer, it goes a lot deeper than just not feeding Africa. In a couple years, they're going to be at a 20 million ton shortage. That is a potential EdTech solve, I think, between finding a network of supply chain advocates that care beyond working for their data analyst, data consultancy jobs. It'll take a lot of people in gardening and education to say, hey, can we, like that guy on TED Talk, I forgot his name, but he talked about creating schools in 3 days in Africa, or 3 hours, build a school in 3 hours. And how could we then create a school in 3 hours teaching them about sustainable farming practices, whether it's phosphate-based, nitrate-based fertilizer, and show them what grows well in your area and region in Africa? Can we bring the collective minds together that care about making education accessible through EdTech, through virtual conferences, and making it free when there's world crises like that? Because you have a whole continent of starving people. Well, that's the start of another war, if you ask me. And I'm pro-peace. It's like what Mother Teresa says. You'll never see her at a, well, she said this, but benevolent Saint Mother Teresa, she would say this: you would never see me at an anti-war rally. You'd always see me at a pro-peace rally. And I think that is where we should go with EdTech. We're exactly done with time. 0. Do we have any time for Q&A? Is that okay? Or did everybody ask their questions? No, we're good. Okay, thank you. Question?
Only half sorry for being that guy. So it's kind of a two-parter. The first part is, we have a lot of students. I'm thinking back to the AI and ChatGPT piece that you all were talking about. And we have students that are using tools, and they're talking on forums about how they're using things like Grammarly and Word, because there's a lot of enhanced functionality that's built into their spell checker. Now it's a grammar checker, and they're claiming that that's AI as well. So it seems like those lines between what we're experiencing with somebody potentially writing something with ChatGPT, for example, and it's completely authoring it, versus using another tool and it's rewriting what they were originally putting out there, the lines don't seem as clear. So the question really is, when we start talking about using something to write our papers for students, how does co-authoring look when we're starting to get into these exercises, right? If I write a paper, I drop it into ChatGPT and say, hey, how does this read to you? What are improvements I can make? Is that a different space? Because now we're getting into content creation.
I actually just saw a YouTube video on that. That is not considered plagiarism under current law. So, I mean, it's really like, does it sit right with you? Do you want the bot to author most of it? Or do you want to say, yes, I am the shepherd of collecting the ideas I wanted to share, and you, through your art, which is something generative AI cannot emulate, you through your art and, becoming your full personhood and meeting, I'm a little woo-woo now, so I'm gonna get a little woo-woo. Meeting your higher self and your higher purpose, and I don't think it's for the bot to write that paper for you, but technically, no, it's not plagiarism under current U.S. law. So, I mean, there's actually businesses emerging on, co-authoring from the Gen AI space, but it's the true creatives out there, the disruptors, that are going to make great papers and great content. I don't think that's ever going to go away. Does that answer your question? A little bit?
Yeah, but let me also add, let's not forget that there are positive contributions to generative AI, ChatGPT, Grammarly, more focused in K through 12. There may be students that are on an IEP, ADHD. There's a problem in our schools. So some students with an IEP may have access to use of a calculator, as an example, to take their math exam or assessment. So something like Grammarly could be helped with reading, right? So there are some positive contributions to some of these new tools, especially artificial intelligence. And there again, that proposes new investment areas and ideas for our investors.
Love the answers. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I've heard a lot of y'all talking about the oversaturation of EdTech today, and how we are using technology to teach our students. My question is, how much do you feel or think that there should be caution involved in that? Because nowadays we have students that grew up pretty much being born with technology in their hands, from the time they can talk and walk to high school and college graduation. And I would think that we need to be very, very careful because as these kids are more and more reliant on technology, they more and more forget that the greatest computer is in between their ears. And as someone who grew up on technology, I mean, I started way back with COBOL, Pascal, BASIC, using these tools to teach them to help me do certain things. And now these tools are teaching our kids to help them to do certain things. It's kind of a reversal. So I'm wondering how do you feel about re-emphasizing caution on allowing technology to teach our students instead of other basic
Very, very valid.
historic things to teach our students and reminding our students that the greatest computer is in between
their ears.
And that actually leads into the envisioned product, cyber training for educators. It's not just technical, right? It's a platform. We've envisioned gamification being integrated into this product that provides teachers and educators, administrators across the public school system, which is over 120,000 schools in the U.S. It's kind of like we were talking earlier. It's like going to Best Buy, right? You haven't been there maybe 6 months to a year. It's like, what's new in technology? You know, wow, the Fitbit, I've seen a lot about it, but here it is, right here, right? And so it's the same thing with cyber and digital transformation. And so if our teachers are going to develop curriculum and they're going to provide some of the instruction and education to the students, they also need to be up to speed in cyberspace. But I really like your point because it really supports my belief, which I think we believe together. Kids just we need to have the balance of the basics, right? I don't want to see a time where a child will not open a book and read physically. I can tell you many times, and I have problems because it's always iPad, 3 to 4 hours a day for a lot of families. And you are exactly right. We need to keep that balance. And frankly, I would say that's part of the new American dream.
Yeah, and for me, I would just
keeping
say
our kids.
it's a matter of answering your question with a question. Can we run the big data and analysis on where are kids spending their time? As an adult, I love spending extra time on Udemy and YouTube because I like learning stuff. It's just kind of what I do. But kids, is it distraction or is it, beneficial to their learning? And I think about how many kids spend time on Roblox, TikTok. Are they learning anything? So is it really EdTech, to blame potentially about where kids are spending their time? Or are they in the pursuit of higher truths and actually getting something out of the content they're looking at or their eyeballs are captive to? Because we have Gen Z and younger, like you're saying, Hannah, they're just glued to the tech. But what are they spending their time on, and is it of any benefit or relevance to their lives and furthering their education?
So I would say, as you mentioned with like TikTok and asking, are they learning anything? I would say they're learning a lot. The question is, are they learning what we would want them to learn?
Exactly. And that actually hits on your point with the tomato scale and looking at disinformation, right? Don't fool yourself. There are countries, there are state-sponsored entities that want to plant certain information and influence our K through 12.
And by the way, TikTok in China is really different than TikTok here. TikTok was for science and learning. Here it's for kids dancing and wanting to be millionaires through dancing. So just FYI, we're done. But if you guys want to talk to us off stage, we'd be happy to do so. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.